I'm Lillian, 57 years old, and there's nothing I wouldn't do to protect my son, Eric. Every morning, we took my husband, Patrick, to the train station together. That particular Tuesday seemed like any other until we were heading home. Eric gripped my hand so tight it almost hurt. "Mom, we can't go home today," he said, his voice trembling. "Why?" I asked, confused. He paused, then whispered, "Dad." A chill ran down my spine. If you've ever had that gut feeling something was terribly wrong at home, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe. Our life in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Ridgefield, Connecticut seemed picture perfect to outsiders. Patrick and I had been married for 15 years. He worked as a financial analyst for a prestigious firm in New York City, commuting daily on the Metro North. We met at a friend's holiday party, back when I was 28 and he was 30. There was an immediate connection between us that grew into what I thought was an unbreakable bond. For years, we struggled with infertility. The monthly disappointments, the expensive treatments, the emotional roller coaster that threatened to derail our marriage several times. When Eric finally came into our world 5 years ago, it felt like a miracle. He was our perfect little boy with Patrick's dark hair and my green eyes. I left my position as an elementary school teacher to be a stay-at-home mom, wanting to cherish every moment with the child we'd waited so long for. Eric was perceptive beyond his years. He noticed things other children might miss, and we shared a special bond that sometimes felt almost telepathic. He could sense my moods before I even recognized them myself. Our home was a 2-story colonial that Patrick and I had lovingly renovated together during the first years of our marriage. Every corner held memories of laughter and dreams. The backyard with its maple trees was where Eric played every afternoon while I gardened a peaceful routine I'd grown to cherish. But over the past year, something had changed in Patrick. He became increasingly distant, working later hours, his warm smiles replaced with distracted nods. When he was home, he was constantly on his phone, stepping outside for calls he claimed were work-related. The intimacy between us had faded, replaced by stilted conversations about grocery lists and Eric's school activities. I tried to talk to Patrick about the growing distance between us, but he always dismissed my concerns. "You're overthinking things," he'd say. "The new project is just stressful." I wanted to believe him, but a nagging doubt lingered. One peculiar habit Patrick insisted on maintaining was having me drive him to the train station every morning. We had 2 cars, and it would have been more convenient for him to drive himself, especially on days when the weather was bad or Eric was feeling unwell. But Patrick claimed those morning rides were important family time before his long workday. Looking back, I should have questioned this more. I'd been feeling increasingly uneasy for months, like standing on unsteady ground. Something wasn't right in our marriage, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. I chalked it up to the natural ebbs and flows of a long-term relationship, telling myself every couple goes through rough patches, but deep down I sensed it was something more. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Patrick came downstairs dressed in his usual charcoal gray suit, but there was something different about him. He seemed almost cheerful, a stark contrast to his recent moody demeanor. He made coffee for both of us, and even helped Eric with his breakfast, cutting his pancakes into the dinosaur shapes our son loved. "You look nice today," he said, complimenting my simple jeans and sweater outfit as I packed Eric's lunch. I was taken aback by the sudden attention. "Thanks," I replied cautiously. "Any special reason you're in such a good mood?" Patrick smiled a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Can't a man just appreciate his beautiful wife?" During breakfast, he mentioned casually, "Don't worry about picking me up from the station this evening. I'll make my own way home." This was unusual. Patrick rarely took the later trains, claiming they were too crowded. "Are you working late again?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Just some things to wrap up," he replied vaguely, not meeting my eyes. Eric was quieter than usual that morning, pushing his pancakes around his plate rather than devouring them as he typically did. When Patrick ruffled his hair, Eric didn't giggle like he normally would. As Patrick gathered his briefcase and coat, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stepped onto the back porch to take the call. Through the kitchen window, I could see his animated expression, the way he ran his hand through his hair, the way he did when he was excited about something. When he returned, there was a flush to his cheeks that had nothing to do with the chilly October air. The drive to the station was filled with Patrick's unusual chattiness about inconsequential things. The weather forecast, a podcast he'd been enjoying, plans for possibly repainting the guest room. Normally, he spent these rides checking emails on his phone. When we arrived at the station, Patrick leaned over and kissed me longer than usual. "I love you, Lil," he said, using the nickname he hadn't used in months. Then he kissed Eric on the forehead, telling him to be good for mommy. I watched Patrick walk toward the platform, noticing how he turned back once to wave, an almost sad expression flickering across his face for just a moment. As we pulled away from the station, I glanced at Eric in the rearview mirror. He was staring intently at his father's retreating figure, a frown creasing his usually carefree face. We were about halfway home when Eric suddenly sat forward in his car seat, small hands gripping the straps. "Mom, we can't go home," he said urgently. I signaled and pulled into the parking lot of a small strip mall, turning to look at my son. His little face was scrunched with worry, eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "What's wrong, sweetie?" I asked, unbuckling my seatbelt so I could face him properly. "We can't go home," he repeated, lower lip trembling. "Why not? Did you forget something at school yesterday? We can go pick it up." Eric shook his head vigorously. "No, it's Dad," he whispered. My heart skipped a beat. "What about Dad?" "He just got on the train." Eric looked down at his hands, then back up at me. "I heard Dad on the phone last night when you were in the shower. He was talking to the lady." "What lady, honey?" "The lady he talks to a lot. He said she should come to our house today because you and me always go to the grocery store on Tuesday." We did indeed usually shop on Tuesdays. Patrick knew our routines perfectly. "He told her to park down the street so the neighbors wouldn't see her car." Eric continued, his young voice somehow older with the weight of what he was sharing. I felt like I'd been plunged into ice water. Disbelief, anger, and a terrible fear all competed for dominance. Patrick was planning to meet someone at our house while he was supposed to be at work, a woman he didn't want the neighbors to see. My first instinct was denial. Eric must have misunderstood. Patrick wouldn't. He couldn't. But looking at my son's earnest, worried face, I knew he was telling the truth. And suddenly, so many small oddities of the past months crystallized into a devastating picture. "You believe me, right, Mom?" Eric's voice quavered. I reached back and took his small hand in mine. "I believe you, sweetheart. You did the right thing telling me." The question now was, what to do with this information? Confront Patrick immediately, go home, and wait to catch them, or... "Eric, would you be okay if we did a little detective work today?" His eyes widened, but he nodded solemnly. I made a quick decision. "Let's find out what Dad is really up to." We drove back toward our house, but parked a block away on Maple Street, where we had a clear view of our driveway without being easily spotted. The large oak tree provided good coverage, and from this angle we could see both the front entrance and the side door that led to the kitchen. I had brought snacks and Eric's tablet with us, trying to make this unexpected stakeout feel like an adventure rather than the heartbreaking vigil it really was. Eric sat in the back, occasionally asking questions that I tried to answer honestly, without revealing the full extent of my fears. "Is Dad in trouble?" he asked, munching on apple slices. "I'm not sure, sweetheart. We're just checking to make sure everything is okay." "Is the lady bad?" That was harder to answer. "I don't know who the lady is yet, but what Dad is doing doesn't seem right." As we waited, my mind raced through the past months, identifying signs I'd overlooked or rationalized away. The late nights at work that had become increasingly frequent. The business trips that seemed to multiply. The new passwords on his phone and laptop. His decreased interest in family activities. The way he'd become defensive whenever I asked simple questions about his day. There had been a weekend getaway 3 months ago that Patrick claimed was for a financial conference in Boston. When he returned, there was a receipt in his jacket for a restaurant in Cape Cod, nowhere near Boston. When I'd questioned him, he'd become irritated, claiming the team had decided to drive to the coast for dinner one night. I'd let it go, silencing the voice inside that questioned why a dinner receipt would be time-stamped at 11 a.m. Around noon, just as Eric was growing restless, a sleek silver Audi I didn't recognize turned onto our street. It slowed as it approached our house, then pulled into our driveway. My heart pounded so hard, I was sure Eric could hear it. I reached back and gently squeezed his knee, signaling him to stay quiet. We watched as the car door opened and a woman stepped out. She was stunning, beautiful in that effortless way that speaks of youth and confidence. Long chestnut hair, a slim figure shown off by an expensive-looking dress, probably in her early 30s. She carried a small overnight bag in one hand and checked her reflection in the car window before approaching our front door. Before she could ring the bell, the door swung open. And there stood Patrick, my husband, who was supposed to be analyzing financial reports in a Manhattan office building. He was wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt I'd given him last Christmas. He smiled broadly at the woman, pulling her into an embrace and kissing her deeply, right there in the doorway of the home we shared. I felt physically ill, a wave of nausea rising as I watched them. The woman laughed at something Patrick said, caressing his face in a gesture of intimate familiarity before they disappeared inside. Our front door closed behind them. "Why is Daddy kissing that lady?" Eric's small voice came from the back seat, breaking the terrible silence. I swallowed hard, trying to find words appropriate for a 5-year-old while my world collapsed around me. "I don't know, sweetie, but it's not okay." "Is that why he's been sad at home, because he wants to kiss that lady instead of you?" Children can cut to the heart of things with their simple questions. "Maybe," I admitted. "Grown-up relationships can get complicated sometimes." "Are you going to yell at him?" Mrs. Peterson at school yelled when she saw Mr. Peterson kissing the art teacher. Despite everything, I almost laughed at Eric's matter-of-fact reference to what must have been quite the scandal at his preschool. "I don't know what I'm going to do yet," I told him honestly. My phone buzzed with a text from Patrick. "In meetings all afternoon, won't be able to talk. Can you make that roast chicken I like for dinner tonight? Have something special to talk about. Love you." The audacity, the sheer callousness of the message made my hands shake with rage. He was in our home with another woman and texting me about dinner plans. What special thing did he want to talk about? Was he finally going to admit to the affair? Or was something even worse awaiting me? An hour passed. Then another. I drove Eric to a nearby park to let him play for a while, then bought us lunch at a drive-thru, all while keeping an eye on the time. The silver Audi remained in our driveway. I debated confronting them immediately, imagining myself storming in and catching them in the act. But something held me back, a need to understand the full scope of what was happening before I faced it. My phone rang around 2 o'clock. Patrick again. "Hi, honey," he said, his voice cheerful in a way that now sounded completely false to my ears. "How's your day going?" "Fine," I replied, amazed at how normal my voice sounded when I felt anything but. "Just running errands with Eric." Good. Listen, I was thinking I'll catch the 6:30 train. Can you have dinner ready by 7:30? I've got a surprise for you." "I bet you do," I thought bitterly. "Sure," I said instead, looking forward to it. After ending the call, I made a decision. I needed help, and more importantly, I needed information. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting at my sister Amanda's kitchen table, tears streaming down my face as I explained what Eric and I had discovered. Amanda lived just 20 minutes from us in neighboring Wilton, close enough to be a regular part of our lives, but not so close that she knew every detail of our daily routines. Eric was in the basement playroom with his cousins, happily distracted by their company. Amanda's face darkened with anger as I spoke. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I was afraid something like this might be happening," she admitted. I stared at her. "You knew?" She shook her head quickly. "Not knew, suspected. I saw Patrick at a restaurant in Norwalk about a month ago with a young woman. They looked close. When I mentioned running into him to you the next day and you said he'd been working late, I wondered. But I didn't want to hurt you without being sure." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Another lie. "I need to figure out what's really going on," I said. "Not just the affair, but everything. Something about this feels bigger." Amanda nodded. "Use my laptop. Let's check your account's emails, anything we can access." What we discovered over the next hour was far worse than I'd imagined. Patrick had been systematically preparing for a new life without me for months. First, we checked our joint bank accounts. While regular deposits from his salary continued, there had been numerous withdrawals, large ones moving money to an account I didn't recognize. Nearly half of our savings had been diverted over the past 3 months. "He's building his escape fund," Amanda said grimly. Next, I logged into our shared cloud storage where we kept important family documents. In a folder I rarely accessed labeled investment options, I found emails between Patrick and several real estate agents about apartments in the city studios, and one bedrooms, all clearly intended for a single person or perhaps a couple without children. The most recent email confirmed a lease signing scheduled for this coming Friday for a luxury apartment in Tribeca. There were dozens of text messages backed up to the cloud between Patrick and someone saved in his phone as J-Work. Their exchanges left no doubt about the nature of their relationship or its duration. The affair had been going on for nearly a year, starting as flirtation and growing increasingly serious. Her name was Jessica, and she worked in Patrick's department. "We'll be together for real soon," read one message from Patrick sent just days ago. "Once everything's settled with the money and the apartment, we can start our life together." Jessica's reply made my blood run cold. "What about your son? Are you really going to leave him?" Patrick's response: "Working on that. The lawyer thinks we have a good case for primary custody with my stable income. Once Lillian realizes she can't afford to keep the house on her own, she'll be more reasonable about custody arrangements." I sat back stunned. He wasn't just leaving me, he was planning to take Eric too. But the most devastating discovery came when Amanda suggested checking Patrick's email drafts, a common place people store sensitive information they don't want to send. There, we found correspondence with an attorney specializing in contentious divorces. Patrick had been building a case against me for months, documenting out of context instances when I'd been tired or frustrated with parenting times I'd asked him to watch Eric because I needed a break. Even a minor fender bender I'd had last winter that he was characterizing as evidence of erratic behavior. He claimed I was emotionally unstable, possibly suffering from depression that made me an unfit parent. He'd even gone so far as to install spyware on my computer and phone monitoring my search history and communications, looking for anything he could use against me. The custody filing was already prepared, waiting to be submitted. The plan was clearly for Patrick to take half our assets, move into his new apartment with Jessica, and then fight for custody of Eric using his financial advantage to overwhelm me legally. I felt physically ill reading through these calculated, cold-hearted plans. The man I'd loved for 15 years, the father of my child, had been systematically plotting to destroy me while sleeping beside me every night. "That son of a bitch," Amanda whispered, reading over my shoulder. "Lillian, we need to move fast. This changes everything." She was right. This wasn't just about confronting Patrick about an affair. I was fighting for my son and my future, and I needed to be smart about it. Amanda helped me formulate a plan. First, she called her husband Thomas, who immediately left work to come support us. Then, she contacted a friend who worked as a paralegal at a family law firm, getting me an emergency appointment with one of their top divorce attorneys for the following morning. I forwarded all the evidence we'd discovered to my personal email, taking screenshots and making copies of everything. Then, I called my bank and explaining that I suspected fraudulent activity had our joint accounts temporarily frozen pending investigation. The customer service representative was sympathetic when I briefly explained the situation, suggesting I come in person the next day to discuss separating my finances. By the time we returned to my house, the silver Audi was gone. Patrick's last text indicated he was on the train heading home for our special dinner. Eric stayed at Amanda's with his cousins while Thomas came with me for support, waiting outside in his car. I needed to do the actual confrontation alone. Walking into my own home felt surreal, as if I were entering a stranger's house. In the kitchen, the evidence of Patrick and Jessica's day together was everywhere: a wine bottle on the counter, 2 glasses in the sink, a woman's scarf draped over a chair. They hadn't even tried to clean up their traces. I heard movement upstairs and followed the sound to our bedroom. Patrick was there, pulling clothes from the closet and placing them in a small suitcase on our bed. He startled when he saw me in the doorway. "Lillian, I thought you'd be starting dinner by now." His voice was casual, but his eyes darted nervously to the half-packed suitcase. "What's that for?" I asked calmly, nodding toward the luggage. "Oh, just getting organized for a business trip next week," he said smoothly. "Did you pick up the ingredients for dinner? I'm really looking forward to our talk tonight." I leaned against the doorframe, studying the face of the man I'd once trusted completely. "I think we should have that talk now, Patrick." Something in my tone made him pause. "What's going on? Where's Eric?" Eric is safe with his aunt, and I know everything. He tried to look confused, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. What are you talking about? I know about Jessica, I said quietly. I know she was here today. I know about the apartment in Tribeca, the money you've been moving, and the custody filing you're preparing. Patrick's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, anger, then a cold stillness that was somehow worse than rage would have been. How did you find out? He finally asked. Does it matter? Our 5-year-old son knew something was wrong before I did. He overheard you planning your rendezvous. Patrick sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Then, incredibly, he began to laugh, a hollow, unpleasant sound. Well, this complicates the timeline a bit. I was going to ease into it tonight, tell you I wasn't happy, suggest a trial separation. He shrugged. But I guess we can skip the niceties now. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? I asked. About Jessica, about how long this has been going on. What good would that have done? You'd just make a scene, get hysterical like you always do. His tone was dismissive, as if I were a temperamental child. Like I always do. When have I ever been hysterical, Patrick? Please. Remember when I was 15 minutes late picking up Eric from his swim lesson? You called me 6 times and were crying when I got there. The pool had called to say he was waiting alone and you weren't answering your phone. Any parent would be worried. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You overreact to everything. You've become so wrapped up in being a mother that you forgot how to be a wife. Jessica makes me feel alive again. I stared at him, truly, seeing him for perhaps the first time. How long have you been planning to leave? Does it matter? It's not working, Lillian. It hasn't been for a long time. And your solution was to sneak around, drain our accounts, and try to take my son from me. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Patrick's expression hardened. Our son. And let's be realistic, you can't afford to keep this house on a teacher's salary, especially one you haven't used in 5 years. Eric deserves stability. With my income, and Jessica's, we can give him the best of everything. You think taking him away from his mother and moving him in with your mistress is stability? I was incredulous. Jessica loves kids. She'll be a great stepmom. Much more fun than you, honestly. You're so overprotective, it's stifling. Each word was a knife, but I forced myself to stay focused. And the attorney, the case you're building against me, he waved his hand dismissively. Just covering my bases. Courts favor mothers. I needed leverage. Leverage? You've been documenting normal parenting moments and twisting them to make me look unstable. If you're reasonable about the divorce and custody, none of that will need to come out, he said, his tone making it clear this was a threat. You've been bringing her to our house, I said, changing tactics, while I was out with Eric. Patrick at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. The hotels in the area all know me from work events. And our bed. Have you been sleeping with her in our bed? His silence was answer enough. You're despicable, I whispered. Don't act so shocked, Lillian. Our marriage has been dead for years. I stayed this long for Eric. No, you stayed this long to plan your exit strategy, to figure out how to leave me with as little as possible and take my son. Patrick stood suddenly, towering over me. Our son. And yes, I want custody. You've turned him into a mama's boy, clinging to you all the time. He needs a father's influence. A father who lies, who cheats, who teaches him, that's how you treat people who love you. His face darkened and he took a step toward me. You don't get to judge me. You stopped being a real wife years ago. Do you know how many of my colleagues are envious of my relationship with Jessica? She supports my ambitions. She's passionate and exciting. When was the last time you were any of those things? When was the last time you deserved them? I shot back. Patrick moved closer, his finger pointing in my face. You're not going to make this difficult for me, Lillian. I have everything documented. One call to my lawyer and we'll see who looks stable in court. I didn't back away despite his intimidating stance. I know exactly what you've been documenting, Patrick. I've seen it all, the emails, the custody filing, everything. You really think a judge will look at a father who conducted an affair in the family home and plotted to ambush his wife with divorce and believe he has his son's best interests at heart? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. It's my word against yours. I reached into my pocket and held up my phone. Actually, it's not. I've been recording this entire conversation. The blood drained from Patrick's face. You can't do that. Connecticut is a one-party consent state for recordings, Patrick. You should have researched that before plotting your legal strategy. He lunged for my phone, but I stepped back quickly. It's already backed up to the cloud, I said calmly. Amanda and Thomas have copies too. You bitch, he hissed, then immediately tried to recover. Lillian, come on. We can work this out reasonably. We're both upset right now. I want you out of this house tonight, I said evenly. Take what you need for a few days. The rest can be arranged through attorneys. You can't throw me out of my own house? Actually, I can. I've already spoken with the police. Given the circumstances and the fact that Eric is afraid to be in the house with you, they're sending an officer to stand by while you pack. He should be here any minute. This was a bluff, Amanda had suggested, but Patrick didn't know that. This isn't over, he threatened. Not by a long shot. You're right about that, I agreed, but it's not going to end the way you planned. Patrick left that night with a suitcase of clothes and personal items, his face a mask of cold fury. True to Amanda's prediction, he oscillated between threats and attempts at reconciliation, trying every manipulation tactic he could think of. But something had solidified in me a determination I didn't know I possessed. Thomas helped me change the locks that same evening. We also changed all the passwords to our accounts and set up security cameras at Amanda's insistence. He's not taking this well, she observed as Patrick's increasingly angry text messages continued through the night. We need to be cautious. The next morning, I met with Caroline Ellis, the divorce attorney Amanda's friend had recommended. She was a formidable woman in her 60s with a reputation for fiercely protecting parents in contentious custody battles. After listening to my story and reviewing the evidence I'd gathered, she nodded grimly. He overplayed his hand, she said. The recording alone gives us significant leverage. His attempts to build a fraudulent case against you will not sit well with any judge, especially with his documented affair. She helped me file an emergency temporary custody order that same day, using Patrick's own evidence against him. The spyware he'd installed on my devices, meant to gather ammunition against me, now served as proof of his deceptive and controlling behavior. I also visited my bank in person, as recommended. With the evidence of Patrick's financial deception, they helped me secure what remained of our joint assets and establish new accounts in my name only. The branch manager, a mother herself, connected me with a financial advisor who specialized in helping women establish independence after divorce. Patrick, meanwhile, switched tactics. When threats didn't work, he tried guilt, sending long messages about how he'd made a mistake and wanted to fix our family. When that failed, he attempted to use Eric, suggesting we meet to discuss what's best for our son. Each message revealed more clearly the manipulator behind the man I thought I knew. Jessica vanished from the picture almost immediately. According to a colleague of Patrick's who'd always been friendly with me, she'd expected him to leave me in a straightforward manner, not to construct an elaborate scheme to take my child and finances. When the truth came out, she wanted no part of it. Patrick's carefully constructed new life was crumbling around him. The most difficult part was explaining the situation to Eric in age-appropriate terms. With guidance from a child psychologist, recommended by my attorney, I told him that Daddy had made some choices that meant he couldn't live with us right now, but that both of us still loved him very much. Eric seemed to accept this with the resilience children often show, though he asked many questions in the weeks that followed. Did Daddy leave because I told you about the lady? He asked one night as I tucked him in. Absolutely not, I assured him. You did exactly the right thing. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love. That's never the fault of the children. Will Daddy try to take me away? His small voice broke my heart. No, sweetheart. You're staying right here with me in our home. That's a promise. I was determined to keep that promise no matter what. 6 months later, our lives had found a new rhythm. The divorce proceedings had moved relatively quickly once Patrick realized the strength of my case. The recording of our confrontation, combined with the documentation of his financial deception and the prepared custody filing, severely undermined his position. His attempt to claim I'd entrapped him fell apart under scrutiny, especially when his own emails revealed the calculated nature of his plans. Jessica had indeed left him when his financial situation became complicated, and his new apartment remained half-furnished and lonely, according to mutual friends. The court awarded me primary custody of Eric, with Patrick granted supervised visitation until he completed a co-intervention program. The house remained mine, along with a fair portion of our assets and substantial child support. Patrick's career took a hit when his unethical behavior came to light. His firm had strict policies about relationships between colleagues, which he and Jessica had violated for months. I returned to teaching part-time at a school close to home, allowing me to be there for Eric before and after his school day. The routine gave both of us stability during a turbulent time. My sister Amanda and her family remained our rock Sunday dinners at their house, becoming a cherished tradition that helped Eric understand family could still be loving and secure despite the changes. Rebuilding my life wasn't easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, mourning not just the end of my marriage, but the loss of the man I thought I had married. The betrayal cut deep, making it difficult to trust my own judgment. But with each passing week, I grew stronger. I joined a support group for divorced parents, forming friendships with women and men who understood exactly what I was going through. One of the most healing aspects was helping newcomers to the group, seeing how far I'd come when I could offer guidance to someone just beginning the journey. Eric started seeing a child therapist who specialized in helping kids through divorce. The play therapy sessions helped him process his feelings in age-appropriate ways. His resilience amazed me. His ability to adapt while still expressing his emotions honestly became my model for healing. "Daddy was mean to you," he said, matter-of-factly one day after a supervised visit with Patrick. "The lady made him different. People make their own choices, sweetheart," I explained gently. "Your dad made some bad choices, but he still loves you." "I know," Eric nodded, "but I'm glad we're here together, just us." Those simple words affirmed that despite everything I'd done right by my son, the bond between us had not only survived, but strengthened through adversity. The journey to forgiveness was the longest and hardest path I had to walk. Not forgiveness of Patrick necessarily, but of myself, for not seeing the signs earlier, for doubting my instincts, for thinking I could have prevented the pain somehow. Eventually, I came to understand that Patrick's betrayal was never about my failings. It was about his choices, his character. And in the crucible of that devastating discovery, I found a strength I never knew I had. The morning Eric warned me not to go home was the beginning of the hardest chapter of my life, but also the most transformative. It taught me to trust my child's wisdom, to honor my own intuition, and to fight fiercely for what matters. Sometimes the people we trust the most can betray us in unimaginable ways, but the love between a mother and child truly is unbreakable. Have you ever had a moment when your child's insight revealed something you couldn't see yourself? Or have you experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to a stronger, more authentic life? Share your story in the comments below, and if this resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support means everything as I continue sharing these difficult but healing stories. Remember, even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and peace on your own journey.